Hey, this is Jungle Jenna, and I'm reviewing the Universal Classic Monsters collection, and I'm also reviewing Creature from the Black Lagoon. So, in this collection, it includes um, Dracula, Frankenstein, the Bride of Frankenstein, the Wolf Man, the Invisible Man, and the Mummy. And I included Creature from the Black review in this review because I feel like it should have been part of this collection, but it wasn't. Prior to purchasing these movies, I had never seen them before, and I mostly purchased Creature from the Black Lagoon because it was direct inspiration for The Shape of Water, which is like one of my favorite movies. And then I saw that this was like in the recommended it was like recommended along with Creature from the Black Lagoon, and since I'd never seen the movies before, they really intrigued me just because they're so iconic, and so I decided to buy that along with Creature from the Black Lagoon. So the first one I watched was The Mummy, starring Boris Karloff and Zita Johann. Initially, I wasn't that impressed with The Mummy. I just thought it was kind of slow and boring. I immediately picked up on the inspiration for the 1999 remake of The Mummy starring Brendan Fraser, though, because the main character played by Boris Karloff, his name is Imhotep, just as The Mummy in The Mummy is Imhotep, and his love interest is Moon. And Ardith Bey, who is the Mummy's alter ego in the Boris Karloff version, that is the name of the one Magi character in the 1999 Mummy version. The Mummy kind of grew on me though because of its romanticism. I would have to say it's like one of the more romantic classic monster movies. Basically, in this version, the Mummy doesn't stay wrapped up. He disguises himself as a man named Ardith Bey, and he attempts to seduce Zita Johann's character into following him because he believes her to be the incarnation of his long lost love. Boris Karloff's relationship with Zita Johann's character is my favorite part of this movie, and it's very something there's something very magnetic about it, and he often tries to hypnotize her into coming to him. There are moments in the movie where Boris Karloff simply stares at the camera with his big sunken eyes and his hollow cheekbones, and his stare is so compelling and riveting, and the makeup is fantastic. He has dark circles around his eyes to make his eyes appear more sunken, and he has cotton glued to his face to make his face appear withered, almost as if he really is like thousands of years old. After this movie, I became completely obsessed with Boris Karloff. I'm not going to lie. I know a lot about Boris Karloff now. And it was really the dark romance and the mysticism of this movie that made me want to return to it. And it, like I said, it kind of grew on me. The second one I watched was The Wolfman, starring Lon Chaney Jr. It was really cool to see Lon Chaney's son star in this because Lon Chaney played the Phantom in the silent version of Phantom of the Opera, and that's like I love that movie. So it was like really cool to see his son play the Wolfman, and he plays a character named Larry who is bitten by a werewolf, and he's a compelling character because he's terrified of himself during his transformations, and he's terrified of what he will do to other people, especially his love interest, who, for the life of me, I can't remember her name. Sometimes Larry, his character comes off as really creepy in his pursuit of his love interest because he actually first spots her through a telescope where she's trying on jewelry, and then he goes to her antique shop and asks for that particular jewelry piece, and then says, "Well, I've seen you put it on. I know because I saw you through my telescope." And it's like, "Okay, weirdo, just like back off a little bit and just play it cool." But no, he does not play it cool. And she's already engaged, but she, like, for whatever reason, just decides that she likes him, and he's like super pushy about her going for a walk with him through the forest like really late at night, and she intelligently or smartly, whatever you want to call it, brings a chaperone with her because he's obviously giving her this creeper vibe. So yeah, the Wolfman was good, but it wasn't like, it was entertaining, but it didn't have as much of a profound impact on me. But I would definitely watch it again. And I would say that the funniest part of the movie is the werewolf, the wolf man tiptoeing through the forest. So yeah, that I thought that was like a really cute touch. Next, I watched The Invisible Man, starring Claude Rains and Gloria Stewart. Claude Rains also starred in a version of the Phantom of the Opera that I'd seen a really long time ago, and even though it wasn't my favorite version, I was really excited to watch The Invisible Man once I learned that Claude Rains was in it. And Gloria Stewart is the old woman from Titanic. She plays the old Rose character. So it was really cool to see her in her when she was really young and playing the fiance of Jack Griffin, who is the Invisible Man. At first, I did not want to watch The Invisible Man. It was the one that I was least excited to watch. I just didn't know anything about it, and I I didn't know what to expect, so I wasn't looking forward to it, basically. That's redundant, but anyway. After watching it though, I would say that it's by far my favorite version, or my favorite classic monster movie, out of all the ones that I watched. And I have even invested some interest in watching the sequel, The Invisible Man Returns, which actually stars Vincent Price, who was a legendary figure in those, classic horror movies, and is the old man in Edward Scissorhands, who created Edward Scissorhands himself. So, yeah, just a little bit of trivia for you. So, The Invisible Man is about a man named Jack Griffin who has recently discovered the key to invisibility. And so he wants to find a place where he can quietly work more on his research and come up with a cure for basically reversing invisibility. And the problem is that the chemical formula or whatever it is that makes him invisible is actually causing him to go mad. So he's murdering people, attacking people, playing pranks, um, you know, doing all, causing all kinds of mayhem. So there's like a very fine line between like a very dark, sardonic sense of humor and lightheartedness with horror, because it's a very like entertaining, funny movie. Like the first part where the first time that he unravels the bandages from his head, and he's like cackling madly the whole time that he's doing it, and he's throwing his eyepieces at the villagers who at the inn who are very curious about him. That whole scene is like hilarious. And there's a scene where he's only wearing pants, and he's like skipping down this like road after this woman, and he's like singing a song. But then he turns around and he kills his best friend by pushing him in a car off a cliff, and the car explodes. So it's like a totally crazy movie. Um, and I would have to say too that The Invisible Man has one of the better endings of the classic monster movies, because some of the other ones are kind of rushed, whereas with The Invisible Man, they kind of have like a nice conclusion to the story, and the last that you see of the movie is Jack Griffin for the first time visible as he dies. So yeah, it's a very nice ending. What's also great about this movie is that Claude Rains basically has to act entirely through his voice, and he has an amazing voice, and the special effects are amazing too, especially for this period of time. Like, I was often wondering how they were able to accomplish what they were. And this movie was directed by James Whale, who also directed Frankenstein and The Bride of Frankenstein. So um, he has a very specific style that's very like campy and over the top, and very like has like a very dark sense of humor. And you can definitely see that in Bride of Frankenstein and The Invisible Man, especially. The next two films I watched were Frankenstein and The Bride of Frankenstein. I was looking forward to these two the most, as well as Dracula, and I was not disappointed. So, like I said, Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein, they were both directed by James Whale, who did The Invisible Man. And Frankenstein is kind of different. It's not as campy, and it's a little bit darker and more somber than Bride of Frankenstein and Invisible Man. Um, Frankenstein barely has any soundtrack. Most of the background is filled with sounds like thunder, an angry mob, uh, wailing bloodhounds. It's kind of a chaotic sounding movie, but it's like really effective because it's just simple. And it really draws you into, because there are like long sequences where you hear like the same sounds. And so it kind of draws you into the film. And the first time that you get to see Boris Karloff in his makeup, the camera does like this. It kind of zooms in very quickly to his face, where you see like his sunken eyes and his hollow cheekbones, and it's so like creepy but so like hauntingly beautiful at the same time. I just love Boris Karloff's face. He has like the most interesting features ever, and it just like intensified my love for Boris Karloff. And one thing they did in the first Frankenstein that I really liked, that they didn't really do as much in Bride of Frankenstein, is that they had Boris Karloff wearing like a lot of padding, and he was wearing lifts on his shoes to make him appear taller and bigger. So he like literally just appeared monstrous in Frankenstein. So they weren't able to do that in Bride of Frankenstein because it did put a lot of like physical strain on Boris Karloff. But it was really cool. It was a really cool effect in the first one. And The Bride of Frankenstein is very good too. Even though you only get to see the bride for like 3 minutes, it's so satisfying. And Bride of Frankenstein has a really great soundtrack. Frankenstein is one of those monsters he's monstrous, but he's also very sympathetic, because part of his character is that he just wants to belong and he wants someone like him. And you see that especially in The Bride of Frankenstein, where he wants to have a female counterpart, and he is longing for a friend. And he briefly has that when he meets a blind man in the forest, but then he's driven out away by villagers who recognize him. And when his female counterpart is finally made, and he's like so excited, and he even takes her hand and is looking at her expectantly for her reaction, and she ends up screaming at him and hissing and pulling away. And so even the one who was supposed to be made for him rejects him, and he ends up just, blowing up Frankenstein's castle and just kills everybody except for Dr. Frankenstein and his fiance or wife. I can't remember if they are married at that point. But anyway, yeah, it's all about humanity, and um, it's about, trying to find that sense of belonging, which he's never able to have. I haven't seen like The Son of Frankenstein or any of the sequels after that, but I would definitely say that Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein are both beautiful. And I can't remember if I've already said this, but Bride of Frankenstein is a lot more campy. There's a lot more humor and kind of like odd things that happen, like miniature people in glass jars. Sorry about that. Dracula was the last that I saw on that particular DVD collection, and it was by far the creepiest out of all of them. It was actually genuinely creepy. And that one was directed by a man, I can't remember his name, but he was used to directing silent films, and he was much more comfortable with like directing in that style. And so you can kind of see that same style with Dracula, where there are long sequences without any talking or without any music. And there's actually very little music um, in the entire movie. It's only there when it makes sense for it to be there, like when they're at a play or an opera. So that's the only music you get in the whole movie. But Bela Lugosi, who played Dracula, he basically is the template for every single version of Dracula that's been made since. He's suave, sexy, seductive, uh, frightening. He's basically got the accent going because he is Hungarian, and he's basically got all the charms for the women, and the women find him irresistible, but also put off by him at the same time. I would have to say that the standout performance of this movie was the guy who played Renfield, who was Dracula's first victim in the movie, who slowly transforms into a creature of the night, and he craves the blood of bugs and rats. So he's a really creepy character who is in an who's stuck in an insane asylum back in England, who like always happens to escape. Like he's always like getting loose and they have to go track him down, but he's always there to like creep everybody out. But yeah, Dracula was a very satisfying one. Needless to say, I had the heebie-jeebies after watching this movie, and I was like a little bit spooked when it came to going to bed. Maybe I'm just a wuss, and I'm pretty sure that that is the case, but it was also kind of a creepy film. So last but not least, I have Creature from the Black Lagoon. Like I said, I bought this mainly because of The Shape of Water, and I can see how Guillermo del Toro was inspired by it when he was a kid because of the creature's fascination with the woman. And there's this really beautiful sequence where she's swimming on top of the water and he's below her, basically like mirroring her movements. So they're like swimming together and they're in sync with each other. And there's a part where he is going to grab her ankle, like you think that he's going to, but it's kind of a tease where he goes to grab it and then he pulls away and he's very hesitant and kind of curious about her. So I can definitely see like the inspiration for The Shape of Water, especially the times when the creature goes to bridal carry the girl away and take her to his lair. So yeah, those parts were great. When I think of a creature feature film, Creature from the Black Lagoon is definitely what comes to mind because you get to see the creature a lot and the special effects for it are great. And it really is just like a kind of a straight up monster movie. But the creature does have a sympathetic streak, kind of like the other Universal monsters. And even the woman who played the girl, the woman in the movie, I can't remember her name or the actress's name. She even, there was a quote where she said that the creature itself is a very sympathetic character because it represents like this dark side of us that wants to be loved and wants to have that belonging. So I thought it was interesting that even she, you know, being in the film making it, found the creature to be sympathetic. What's funny is that prior to watching these movies, I wasn't really a big fan of black and white movies. But because there's this thing at my local theater called Flashback Cinema where they play a lot of old movies, and because of these monster movies, it's really made me want to research more. It makes me want to watch more old movies and to really, you know, study them and find out, you know, what it took to make them. And that's actually what's great about both of the DVDs that I have is that there's a lot of bonus material where it goes over the making of the movies and also kind of like the legacy that was left behind by these films. So thank you so much for watching my Universal Monsters review, and I hope that you have a great day. Bye.